On the phone, we have a baseball Hall of Famer. He managed the Kansas City Royals and also the St. Louis Cardinals, to mention a few. He also was a player back in his younger days. Hall of Famer Whitey Herzog. Whitey, I see that you got drafted by the Yankees. Was that your dream growing up to play for the Yankees?
Well, when I'm old enough, there was no draft. I mean, in those days, everybody could sign anybody, and the Cubbies, Joe Kernan came in, tried to sign me. The Browns wanted to sign me, and then the Yankees came in and gave me a line of bull that DiMaggio was getting old, and I signed with them. So whether it was a mistake or not, it turned out okay. I got to the big leagues, got traded to Washington in 1956, and was never what I'd call a good enough ball player to be a regular, but I did get 8.5 years as a player in the big leagues.
Did you envision hitting a lot of home runs over that short right field fence at Yankee Stadium?
I never played a game for the Yankees in uniform. I went to spring training with them twice to the rookie league, and then I got traded. But the Yankee Stadium right field wall you had at the corner of you and right center wasn't that short. But I would have loved to play there. But that's the place to play. That's when they were winning everything. Of course, when I was playing in the big leagues from 56 to through 64, the Yankees were a powerhouse. That's when they had the M boys tearing them up.
Yeah, Mantle and Maris. They didn't get much better than that.
Right.
What did Casey Stengel, what kind of influence did he have on you as a player?
Well, I always looked up to Casey as being the best fundamental teacher I've ever known. He was the darndest guy I'd ever seen. Everybody thought he was a clown, and when they came to the Yankees, George Weiss got ridiculed because he was kind of exiled in the Pacific Coast League for about 12, 14 years. And when he came to the Yankees, he stepped into a wonderful position, replaced Bucky Harris, I think, and then in '49 won his first World Series, and then I think he won 10 out of 12 in 12 years. I think he had 12 World Series championships. But Casey and I got to be pretty good friends. I was with him with the Mets in the latter years of his life after he was managing, and was with us all the time in spring training when I was in charge of the minor leagues. And he was a wonderful teacher and a very, very astute baseball man.
Do you think there'll ever be another manager like Casey Stengel that was so wise and knew how to handle all these stars?
I don't understand what you're saying, Dave. Do what?
Nope. Do you think there'll be another manager like Casey? Because, I mean, Casey had a lot of personalities to deal with and stars, but he had the respect of his players.
Well, and I don't think there'll ever be another manager. I just don't think there'll be another guy like Casey. He was the greatest ambassador that baseball ever had. You know, I mean, he was so popular. I think if I can go back in history, because I'm pretty old and so forth, I don't think any managers ever drew people except Casey Stengel. I think Casey was part of the tenants the Yankees had the years they were winning, but people came to see Casey Stengel. And I was thinking that was true after he even went over to the Mets of the expansion team, because they didn't finish out of last place till 1966. I mean, and they were still drawing 2 million people, and I think part of that was Casey Stengel.
I always laugh when I see your quote, "Baseball has been good to me since I quit trying to play it." How did that come about?
Well, it's the truth. I mean, I wasn't what you'd call a guy that burned them up, and I was kind of an extra man in the big leagues. And I think I made that statement after we won a few pennants here in St. Louis and a few division titles in Kansas City, and I was making pretty good money as a manager, and that's when I made the statement.
What I never understood is why Casey wanted to manage the Mets and go to an expansion team. I mean, he had all that success with the Yankees. You think it would have been difficult for him to try to even match that?
Well, you know, the Yankees retired Casey at, they said it was mandatory at 70, that that was their retirement age for their employees. Casey wanted to keep managing, and he loved the big city, and the big city loved him. And I don't think he worried too much about winning and losing in those days, because I think that first year the Mets lost 120 some games, and they had to be tough. But Casey kept the writers, laughing and going on, and he'd sit and drink with them all night. He was a strong man, and he was just, very receptive with the writers, and the writers all loved him, and there was a lot of media in New York, which.
How did you decide to go into scouting?
Well, I think Peters was the farm director of Kansas City A's at that time, and Charlie Finley was the owner, and their scout was Jimmy Gleason was taken to the Yankees as a coach. So they had an opening on the scouting thing, and I was lucky enough to replace him. And I love scouting. I got to draft the first year in 1964 before the free agent draft started in 65. And it was like you had to know the players personally, the parents. It was really fun scouting at that time.
Who was your first big find as a scout?
Well, I think that first year, I signed 12 ball players for about $125,000, and 7 of them got on the big league roster in 2 years. So everybody thought that I might know what I was looking at and so forth. And there's a lot of guys that were out there in the bushes with me that, anyway, they would turn down Mickey Mantle if they saw him in a high school game. But I was lucky enough that I got to scout the Northern League, the Basin League, and of course I had a good territory in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, half of Arkansas, northern Texas. So I had a pretty big territory, and there was a lot of good high school baseball and college baseball out there.
How gratifying was it to know that the players you scouted and signed turned the Mets into World Series champs in '69 and '73?
I don't understand the point of that question.
Oh, how did it make you feel knowing that the players that you drafted and signed became the key members of the '69 and '73 Mets?
Well, actually, when we won the World Series in 1969, the first expansion club to do it, I was the director of player development for the Mets, in charge of the minor leagues. And on that World Championship club in 1969, we never had a number one pick that we took, Les Rohr, Chilcott, or anybody that was on that team. Nobody had made the big leagues. But we did run a lot of tryout camps. We made a lot of good moves, and we signed a lot of good young pitchers. But we got Seaver out of a hat when only 4 clubs got in the thing after Atlanta had signed him illegally. They drew our name. Jerry Kuzman was in the service, and I think we drafted him for signed him for $1,200. Gary Gentry, our number 3 starter with the Mets that year, became ineligible scholastically at Arizona State, and couldn't play the next year, and we got him in the secondary draft. So we made some good moves, and we also were very lucky with the fact that they drew Seaver out of the hat. And we were able to get Kuzman because some usher walked into the front office in New York and told Joe McDonald, who was the head of the minor leagues, about him, and Red Murphy, our scout, went down and signed him. So without Seaver and Kuzman, I don't think you'd have heard much about the Mets in '69 and '73.
I know Cub fans wish they never heard of the Mets in '69.
Well, they call it the Miracle Mets, and we had outstanding pitching, and Gil did a great job managing, along with Rube Walker handling the young pitching staff and so forth. And, people forget that the next year, in September, we were right in the race, and I think we were just a few games out of first place, and we played Pittsburgh back-to-back 4-game series, and near the end of the season, they beat us 7 out of 8, and they won in 70. But the fact really remains when you have good starting pitching every day, where a blue pit, an air, or anything can win a ball game for you because you're in every game with your good pitching, and that was a secret to our success.
When Gil Hodges died and you were passed over for manager in favor of Yogi Berra, did that hurt you that deeply that you said, you know what, I want out of here?
No, not so much. I never looked at it that way. I always felt that no matter what my job was, I wanted to be the best at it, whether I was the third base coach or the director of player development and so forth. I know the New York press was very good to me, and I was very popular when I was with the Mets, and maybe they were saying that, but I never heard that said by anything. I turned down a few big league managing jobs before I ever did take the one in Texas, which wasn't too smart a move, but Ted Williams talked me into taking over the Rangers in '73, and I didn't even last a year and got fired.
It doesn't seem like they gave you a chance there. It seemed like when they heard Billy Martin was available, they said, let's get Billy, and that was it.
Well, Bob Sharp was the owner, and when Billy got fired in Detroit on Sunday morning, he was in the dugout, and I heard him whisper to somebody else in the dugout. He said, I'd fire my grandmother to hire Billy Martin. Well, I turned out to be the grandmother.
I guess he had to listen to the grandmother. When you went to Kansas City, you built that team on speed and defense. Was that your object from the start?
Well, I really think when I went to Kansas City, I just stepped into a wonderful situation after being in a bad situation in Texas. When I went to the Angels and coached third base for Bobby Winkles in 1964. In '74. I was lucky that Joe Burke, the general manager of Texas, went to Kansas City, and when he had to make a move with Mr. Jack McKeon, I was one of the lucky ones that was interviewed, and I got the job. But it was a great situation. I had George Brett come up as a 21-year-old rookie. John Mayberry was there. He did 39 home runs the year before. I had a great AstroTurf shortstop in Freddie Patek that they got from Pittsburgh. But I had Amos Otis, Sal McRae, and I had two guys sitting on the bench that weren't playing. And I put them in the lineup after watching them work out for about 2 weeks, and they turned out to really be good ball players with Frank White and Al Collins. And I think getting Darrell Porter in the trade to give us the catcher that we needed, to go with crafty left-handers like Gura from the Yankees, Splittorf. Busby had hurt his arm by the time I got there, but we had drafted a kid from Flushing, New York, Dennis Leonard, and he turned out to be a great pitcher for us. So I think it was the fact that I stepped into a bad situation in Texas, but a wonderful situation in Kansas City.
The only problem was you had to go against a Yankee team every year, and they were just so even dominant in the late 70s.
Well, the big thing was we never spent any money in Kansas City on free agency, and when free agency started, George, of course, he got signed a lot of people, and of course he had Sparky Lyle in the bullpen that had won the Cy Young and the Rolaids, and then he signed Gossage, and I had them two guys in the bullpen. They got a little bit lucky with Gentry, a skinny left-hander that nobody in their organization liked till I liked him, and then all of a sudden they brought him up to see what he looked like, and he turned out to be the number one pitcher in the league for years. So, a 5-game series after you play 162 games is not really fair. It's amazing even now. In the playoffs in baseball, I was hoping that the first series would be 7, because at least you'd have to use 4 starters once in a while. But you never use your 5th starter. The strength of your team, how you got there, isn't really showing up in the playoffs, because generally you win because you had 5 pretty good starting pitchers.
What made you decide to go to the Cardinals?
I was looking for a job. I'd gotten fired in Kansas City. After the '79 season, we finished 3 games out of first place and set an all-time attendance record. And when Mr. Bush called and told me to come in St. Louis, that's when I took the job.
Did you want control over the personnel as well as managing if you took that job?
Well, I had a wonderful owner in Gussie Bush and a wonderful relationship with him, and we had an agreement that he'd give me a budget, and I'd stay within $500,000 of it every year, over or under, and I could do anything. When I was wearing both hats as general manager and manager, all I had to do was let him know if I traded somebody before it got in the paper. So that was a pretty good way to operate. And once I got everything in place in '82, I had my assistant Joe McDonald become the general manager, and we went on to won a World Series and a couple of pennants in '85 and '87.
I think the best trade you pulled off was that Ozzie Smith for Gary Templeton.
Well, that kind of put the icing on the cake. We had traded 14 ball players and got Levin back at the winter meetings in 1980. We had the best record in '81. That's when we had the strike and the split season, and us and Cincinnati would have won our divisions if they'd have went with the schedule. But we finished one half game in the first half and the second half because we played one less game and so forth. So nobody remembers that, of course, but Tommy Lasorda did something no other manager in history will ever do. He finished 6.5 games out of first place and without a wild card won a World Series.